With the 5th generation of Monster Hunter over in an official capacity, many people are taking this chance to recollect and form their final thoughts on the generation. Favorite and least favorite monsters, rankings of the games, Sunbreak as a completed game, all that and more. I, of course, as the slowpoke I am not able to cover any of those at the moment. What I can talk about, however, is the future. For among this wave of retrospection comes a wave of equal size of people wondering what the next generation of Monster Hunter will bring, for better or for worse. And so, as a smallish topic I could get out while working on other, larger projects, I figured I could count down for you all 5 of my personal wishes for the 6th generation of Monster Hunter. Now, despite being labeled as a top 5, this list is honestly in no particular order. Some wishes may have caveats and omittances, but ultimately this is just a way for me to express some of my desires. Keep in mind, however, that everyone's hopes for the next Monster Hunter game or generation are going to be different, likely for very personal reasons. So please try to be respectful down in the comment section below when talking with each other. With all that out of the way, let's get started. Starting off this small collection of personal hopes for the 6th generation, I have the inclusion of more Monster Hunter Frontier monsters in the mainline games. For many people, the lands of the frontier and its denizens remained as nothing more than a distant dream. A vision that, though we could see, couldn't quite clearly make out. The text was in a different language or just didn't exist. The action wasn't like anything we'd ever seen up till that point. The monsters could be batshit, and the people who did understand the scripture were far and few between. This led to rampant lambasting and exaggeration by a good section of the global player base, especially later on in its life. And by the time some people realized their mistake, the oasis was already gone. For the longest time, ever since its shutdown, it had felt like an impossibility for Frontier and its monsters to be supported in any official capacity. That was until Espinas and his subspecies Flaming were brought into the fold in Sunbreak, and with it came the unlocking of Pandora's box. Now, any and all Frontier monsters could have the possibility of appearing in the mainline games, allowing millions of players to fight what is essentially a brand new monster, especially after going off the vocal and critical reception the two got. That being said, the next few Frontier monsters we are getting aren't probably going to be anything too drastic. There have been interviews in the past, most predominantly during the Iceborne era, saying how if they were to be included, it would be on a case-by-case basis, depending greatly on how the current game works. We also know directly from Suzuki that Espinas and Flaming's inclusion required a lot of consideration from the development team, having to be made from scratch and redesigned slightly to make sure he fit in nicely among the rest of the cast. A large portion of the monster roster would also undergo changes like that, seeing how they are essentially being lifted from a slightly upgraded DOS engine into something like the RE engine. That means probably nothing special like Shantian, Dremudira, Eruzerian, the Zenith monsters, or unknown for a while, much less a large amount of them being introduced for a time. Still though, the possibilities are absolutely exciting, and I can only hope for more Frontier goodness. The next wish I have is for the expansion of underutilized classifications within the franchise, as well as a more diverse pool of flagships. An unfortunate fact is that not everything in the series is created equal. and nowhere can this be seen more than in the various classifications introduced throughout the generations. While classifications like the bird wyverns, brute wyverns, elder dragons, and especially flying wyverns continue to get a solid amount of new species every game or two, there are many more classifications like the temnocerans, carapaceons, snake wyverns, neopterans, and more that either aren't brought back or aren't given new blood to help diversify the species pool. Some classifications like the bird wyverns also have this strange problem of getting loads of new species quite frequently, but often having little to no representation in the mid to late game. The only exception to this being Yangaruga and his variations, who were introduced as early as the first and second generations. And for the longest time, many of these classifications were relegated to the limited roster of monsters they could keep bringing back over and over again. The 5th generation, however, has caused something of a shift in the imbalance of classifications, creating loads of new monsters for old and new ones alike. Rise and Sunbreak alone introduced monsters like the Bishatins, Gosharag, Garangolm, Rachnas, and Tetranodon for the Fanged Beast, Temnoceran, and Amphibian classification respectively, as well as modernizing the Carapaceon skeleton. Meanwhile, World and Iceborne brought in new monsters for the Piscean classification of Gyrototis and Beototis, created the new Wingdrake and Relict classifications, and arguably the biggest change of all, redefining the entire Fanged Wyvern category. Up till this point, the Fanged Wyvern classification had been entirely dominated by one species, the Zinogre family, making the classification somewhat of an oddball, even next to other small classifications. Starting with World, we got a whole bunch of new blood to diversify the catalog, many of them also being smash hits with the Magnamalos, Lunageron, Odos, Tobis, Dodogama, Gyros, and Jagras. The 6th gen could easily continue this trend, giving more love to the underappreciated classifications and allowing for more species diversity within the game, which was a commonly leveled critique at World. Furthermore, while all the flagships of 5th gen are solid and unique in their own right, the heavy emphasis on Elder Dragons and Elder level threats did make the collection feel a little repetitive. So having something like a Snake Wyvern, Carapaceon, or Temnoceran take the center stage as the mascot of one of the next gen games would be a much needed breath of fresh air. The Elder Dragons already have enough attention as is. It's time to show people something new. If there is one thing coming out of a Sunbreak journey that I absolutely appreciate and wish to see become a mainstay in future installments, it would be the follower system. Or, for people who have played Frontier would know it by, the Rasta system. Whichever name you prefer, followers are an amazing addition to the series, simultaneously allowing for more replay value, accessibility especially for players who don't have a good internet connection, and a stronger connection to the various NPCs you meet on your journey. With 8 different followers to choose from, half from Kimura and the other from Elgato, there are loads of different combinations you could play with on quests, thanks to their unique loadouts, customizable AI, as well as unique interactions. And once the restriction on quests was lifted following the 3rd title update, the sky was the limit on who you could bring along and where. This system also played a very important role in the narrative of Sunbreak, allowing the Elgato Knight Fiorain, as well as Master Utsushi on one occasion, to accompany you on urgent quests. This helped fix one of the biggest issues involved with World, and arguably most monster stories in regards to the NPCs and their involvement, creating some of the hypest moments throughout the narrative that nobody would be forgetting anytime soon. With such a well-rounded package that does so many things at once, is it any wonder why I think it should be a mainstay from this point onwards? Many people may laugh and joke about Monster Hunter having a story, but if Sunbreak and the relationships we have with these characters are anything to go by, it most certainly does. And it can be pretty damn good. This upcoming wish of mine is probably the most personal of all the ones I have on here, but I think it's one that has a lot of potential ever since its introduction into the series with the 5th gen, and that would be the New World, Bioenergy, and the Everstream. As the setting for the first half of the 5th gen, the New World is introduced to us as this vast frontier that remains a mystery in the guild records. Elder dragons are migrating to this continent for whatever reason, and it is rapidly escalating from once in a few centuries to now every decade. Multiple fleets have been sent to the continent to explore it and figure out what is going on with the aptly named Elder Crossing, with your character taking part in the 5th and final fleets. Over the course of our stay within the New World, we learn of the mysterious oddities found only within this one location, namely bioenergy and the Everstream. In a big old analogy for the circle of life, the New World is all about monsters coming to a place in order to die and let the energy they have accumulated over the course of their life go into the Everstream to fuel new life. Every environment in the New World is directly influenced or has a hand in the process, namely the Coral Highlands, Ron Vale, and Elder's Recess. The whole plot of the game revolves around monsters affecting the flow of life in one way or another. A thread that continues all the way into Iceborne with Shara Ishvalda and Safajiva. Despite all of that though, we still aren't sure of what exactly bioenergy is, how the Everstream works, or even the nature of the New World, as it is somewhat implied throughout World and the Dive to World book that the land in some way might be crying out, with the fleets receiving the distress signal and going to the New World because of some sixth sense. Wyverians can feel something is at odds with the land, feeling an alien influence meddling with the veins of the Everstream. There's also the tale of the 5 to consider, which paints the New World as some kind of primordial Eden, a garden through which all life originated and departed from to explore the wider world, created from the sacrifice of 5 incredibly powerful dragons. And though we know for sure the modern parallel of one of the dragons of Xeno and Safajiva as the Sapphire Star, we don't really have a good estimation on the other 4. Altogether, this paints an incredibly intriguing question on what exactly the New World is, its sentience, the connection it has to the Old World as a supposed originator, as well as the connection all life, especially Elder Dragons, has to the strange place. Combined with the unknowns behind the full size of a New World, and the myriad of other species or secrets hiding there, and there is so much to discover not only about the New World, but the universe of Monster Hunter. Sure, many could just argue that the Tale of the 5 is a fairy tale in-universe and shouldn't be taken completely seriously. But until an outside source says it is for sure false, word of God within the game has me always considering it as a possibility. With that potential, assuming it would happen, the story could naturally write itself as the settled fleets of the New World exploring further inwards, uncovering new sections of the continent, species, remnants of old civilizations, and perhaps some hint on the true meaning of the Tale of the 5. I recognize there are many who are not a fan of the pseudo-magic of bioenergy in the New World within the context of Monster Hunter. And fair enough, that is very much reliant on your personal view and taste with the world. But as someone who utterly loves a good mystery, this is one secret I just can't help but think about. And finally, the last wish I have for this video is by far the least likely to happen, owing to its nature of having the most complications to include. Nevertheless, I would still like to hope that underwater combat in a next-generation Monster Hunter could be possible. Underwater combat was the Monster team's first attempt at including vertical elements in their games, focusing on hunters moving around a completely 3D environment where depth and height have to be factored into the equation. It was also one of the most lambasted changes of the time, with many arguing about the slower movement speed, camera, controls, depth perception, faster monsters, and weapon balancing. The weapon balancing especially was a big issue, as each weapon had to be revised to work in an aqueous environment, often receiving modifications to their combo strings. This meant that depending on the changes, something like the sword and shield was considered dog shit in the water, while weapons like the lance and gun lance were godlike through receiving little to no changes in their combo structure or movement, arguably being even better than on land. Whether through fan backlash, or just wanting to move on to other ideas for verticality, Monster Hunter decided to drop underwater combat from Free Ultimate onwards, trading it in for a much better received mounting, which still persists strongly to this day as a core design element. Since then, however, small sections of the community have looked back on the mechanic, and through a combination of hindsight, nostalgia, constant teasing from the games, and revival of the old Try servers, began to smile upon the forgotten mechanic with favor. Now, more than ever, old and new fans alike are rallying around underwater combat, wanting Capcom to give the mechanic another chance at life. I, for one, have always been a fan and supporter of underwater combat, finding that it offered a unique, immersive experience from the other land-based hunts. Like, yeah, of course we wouldn't be as fast in the water as the monster. It's their turf. Monsters should have the home field advantage more often, making you feel worried about the upcoming part of the hunt. It's part of what made Raging Brachydios and Iceborne so good, that shake-up from the standard norm that immerses the player into the hunt, and forces them to be more careful. It wouldn't make sense for hunters to be as fast, if not faster than these monsters specifically adapted for traversal in this environment. I also just found that many of the aqueous monsters throughout the third generation were incredibly fun and unique, allowing the team to bring us all new creatures and fight designs we had never seen before. It wasn't just a matter of dodging left, right, or backwards. It was also considering my height in relation to the monster and how best to use that to my advantage. For fuck's sake, this game made Plessia fun! Or at least more bearable than he was previously, which is saying something. Only through the water will monsters like Lagiacris, Royal Ludroth, and Dire Moralis reach their full potential. And until it gets brought back, we might as well have a rat's chance in hell with Ceadeus and Abyssal ever coming back. Don't get me wrong, for all of my nostalgia and adoration, underwater combat for sure has its problems. It wasn't perfect. But I don't see why that alone should be enough to condemn it and all the brilliant ideas it contained to the grave, when a decade and a half has passed since its inception. After all the developments in hardware and experience the team has accumulated, I truly think underwater combat is ready for another go. It ain't going to be easy. Lord knows I don't have any solid ideas for fixes beyond making it more responsive, especially with all the changes since then and the 2 new weapon types. But who said anything in life was easy? Rise up, Third Fleeters, and represent! And so, those have been my 5 wishes for the next generation of Monster Hunter. Or at least, the 5 foremost wishes I can think of at this present moment. I for sure have a lot more rolling around in this brain of mine. Some big, some small. As a whole though, if I were to give a big, grand vision of the gameplay and feel of the next Monster Hunter, I'd want it to be a mix between Iceborne and Free Ultimate, with a little bit of Frontier spicing thrown in, of course. World and Iceborne in my heart just have the absolute perfect vibe for what I imagine a current or even next-gen Monster Hunter to feel like. Right down to the movement, dodging, weapon feel, impact, weight, sound design, effects, and more. It's not too fast and overwhelming like Sunbreak, where it all just meshes together into a blur of aggression and particle effects melting my brain, yet it ain't too slow to where it could turn off many players from playing it. Iceborne has the right balance for all of that, and knows when to crank it up or slow it down when it needs to be. Throw in the underwater elements, monsters, and village feel of Free Ultimate, more preparation similar to the older games, soft reboot elements along with some Frontier monsters, and you have a recipe for what would be my ideal Monster Hunter. But of course, that is all what I feel. And who knows if by Tokyo Game Show, or even the next 5 years, if any of this will be correct. Let me know what you all think down in the comment section below, as well as what your wishes for a personally ideal Monster game would be like. There's a lot to worry about and look forward to from here, and who knows what the future has in store. One thing's for certain though, Monster Hunter will be going strong through all of that. I have been the Monarch of Dragons, and I hope you all have a fantastic day/night wherever you live. Peace and coolest volts.